Hi. In the previous video I've shown to you that humans and language really belong together. And that's not just because human language is different from animal communication systems. It's also because all humans have a language unless there's something really, really wrong. In this MOOC, in every module, I will also discuss topics like this with my students, Inge and Martin. This is going to be our first discussion.
Okay, I would like to ask the first question then, because you just said that all humans have language. Then how come that we do not all speak the same language?
Yeah, that's a very intriguing question. It's something which has intrigued people forever, for thousands of years. Because it's so strange, it's so weird, it's maybe, you could even think it's so bad that we don't all speak the same language, because we can't all understand each other. Well, actually, I think you can debate whether that's a bad thing or not, but you could say at least it's strange. How come? If this is something which is so human, why don't we all do it in the same way? And there are different answers to this question. One of them is that actually this whole idea that language serves as a communication system, I have an idea in my head and I transfer it to you. That might not just be the only function of language, maybe not even the primary function of language. There might be other things. So actually showing that I'm really different from you might be another function of language. And I can show that by speaking differently. So that's one factor. And another factor might be just the fact that every generation has to learn the language again. And language is really complicated. So things can go wrong when you're learning the language. When the children are learning the language, they might do it just slightly differently. And this is how we believe, for instance, that from Latin, in Italy, Italian derived, and in France, French derived, just because people started speaking differently, and slowly, over the generations, these languages drifted apart.
So languages change, and that's why there's so much variation. But do all languages also have the same origin? So it could be possible that there was one region or place or a speech community even in which there was a language that was like an ancestor of all the languages that exist now.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. That would be still, so okay, maybe we don't all speak the same language now, but at least we derive from ancestors who spoke the same language. So Latin maybe had a mother and a grandmother, etc. And maybe if we go back far enough, we will find this one language which is the origin of all. One thing which makes this extra appealing is that it does seem to be the case that our species, Homo sapiens, does have one origin. I brought a globe to show where this origin is, namely here in East Africa. So we know for sure, or at least it seems to be quite sure, that this is where we all came from, and people then migrated to different parts of the world in the course of time. Now, if it is the case that Homo sapiens already spoke, already had a language, so if it's really the case that humans and language belong together, then maybe there was one language spoken already here, and then maybe all languages derive from that. The problem is this is speculation. This is just mere speculation. And the reason for that is languages have been written for maybe, well, 5,000 years or something like that, a very short period. 100,000 years ago, when these migrations maybe started, people only spoke their language, and speaking is just moving the air. And that disappears. That the things I said just now have already disappeared. They're no longer there. They're just there. They were in the air, they're no longer there. Let alone the things of 100,000 years ago. So it's a nice idea that maybe there was a language, a common language 100,000 years ago. Maybe it's even true, but I don't think we will ever know what that language was.
Okay.
So I also have a question, and that has to do with human language. So we've seen that animals and humans have different communication systems, but there surely are some things that look like languages and that sound like languages that humans use, but that I'm not sure that they qualify as languages. So that's, for example, in what they use in Lord of the Rings, or in Star Trek, or in Game of Thrones. There's a system and it's different from anything else that I know. So is it then another language?
Yeah, it has become quite popular in the last decades to make a movie, a science fiction movie, or some movie about some fantasy people, and to give a language to those people. Actually, those languages are very often made by linguists, they're produced by linguists, so it's something which linguists do. So can linguists make languages then? And the answer to that in the end seems to be no. A linguist cannot really make a language, and the reason for that is that an important criteria for distinguishing a natural language from an artificial language is native speakers. Is the language learned by children from a very early age on? Is it learned in a natural way, so not like from a book or in a classroom setting, but just by picking it up from their parents? And that doesn't seem to be the case for these languages. So we don't consider them natural languages for this reason.
So if I would learn Elvish from Tolkien really well and I would teach it to my children, would they then be considered native speakers? And is this happening? Does somebody do this actually?
I'm not sure whether anybody is doing this for Elvish. I don't think I would advise it for anybody to do it for Elvish. But if it would be done, and if it would be done seriously, there would be several problems for these children. So, because who would they speak Elvish to except for their parents? But it would be, in my view, it would be an interesting case for linguists. It would be something which would become worth studying. Still, many linguists consider this to be a problematic kind of case, because, well, there are still all these issues of, you'll probably learn many other languages as well. This will just be a tiny part. There's no community. That was another criterion we saw. There's not a community of speakers, so we distinguish natural languages and artificial languages also in that way. So there's still no community for Elvish. So in a crazy world where there would be a village who would all start speaking Elvish, in a few generations it would be a natural language. It would be a wonderful experiment for linguistics. It would maybe not be such a good experiment for humanity. In this video we have seen that although it might seem preferable for everybody to speak the same language, there's also various reasons why this is not the case. There are historical reasons, there are reasons of language acquisition. And we have seen that there are certain things which in everyday life we might call languages, but which linguists are more hesitant to take into account. And we mentioned some of those, like Dothraki. And I'm sure that among you there will be people who speak some of these languages, like Klingon, or maybe you speak Esperanto. Do you think that those are natural languages given our criteria or not? You can go to our forum and discuss topics like this. In the next video we're going to look more into the diversity of the world's languages. I'm going to talk a little bit about the question whether languages are really countable and how many languages there are in the world. And we're going to look into an important online reference work for studying language diversity in individual countries and in the world.